So next slide, please. Yeah. So I mentioned every state party and caucus has a delegate to the national committee. So putting all those together in this diagram, you can see on the right side here, there's the National Committee, which is the highest decision-making body of the Green Party of the United States. So this is the collection of people that make decisions. So whenever there's like a statement or an endorsement or an action or something, that goes through the National Committee. The National Green Party platform is approved by the National Committee. Any sort of decision like that eventually goes through the National Committee. This committee is made up of about 150 delegates that are distributed proportionally between the states in order to try to keep the body small enough that there can be kind of effective conversations, right? If it's too large, it could be kind of hard to, people start talking over each other, right? So it's trying to balance keeping a smaller number of people so you can have more effective conversations, but keeping it proportional to represent folks. So those delegates come from accredited state parties as well as the identity caucuses. So you can see kind of in the middle here, the identity caucuses, there's an arrow. At the moment, there's 5 accredited caucuses that are recognized by the National Green Party. It's the National Black Caucus, the National Women's Caucus, the National Latinx Caucus, the Lavender Greens, which is essentially the LGBTQIA caucus, and then finally the Young Eco-Socialists, which is the Youth Caucus, which in this case, youth is defined as under 35. So it actually goes up a fair amount, right? And it's not necessarily super youth, but if you're under 35, you should check it out and join it, because Young Eco-Socialists, we're building an eco-socialist movement.
The Republicans' Youth Caucus is up to 40.
Oh, really? Okay. Yeah, I guess they have to do that. So we have these 5 identity caucuses plus accredited state parties in most states, but not all. So each of these elects delegates to the National Committee, but in addition to the National Committee, a lot of the work of the National Party is spun off into these standing committees. So there's committees that tackle different aspects. So there's, for example, a platform committee that oversees changes to the platform and kind of oversees that process. There's a ballot access committee that tries to coordinate states together to try to make sure we're on the ballot in as many states as possible. There's a coordinated campaign committee to try to provide support for potential green candidates, including training. And we also have things like action committees. There's an eco action committee and a peace action committee that should work to promote actions and try to coordinate efforts between state parties to create national action. So there's a bunch of committees, and a lot of them honestly probably need help. So if you're looking for a good way to get involved in the Green Party, that could be a way to do it, to get involved in national committees. Although I wouldn't do that until you're first involved, of course, in your local and state parties doing that sort of work. But there are national committees that handle these things. There's about 20 of them, and you can find out the whole list of all the committees on the Green Party website. So they handle a lot of the kind of specific work, and then if there's decisions to be made based on that, it goes to the National Committee for kind of finalization, right? Now, those are the main decisions that the party makes. There's a lot of day-to-day stuff, such as overseeing the staff. There's a couple of staff members for the National Party, as well as just making sure that all the processes run smoothly. So, for example, when you're voting on something like an endorsement or any kind of proposal put forward by the National Committee, there's a process for how that proposal goes through the National Committee. And someone has to kind of steer that, right? Somebody has to make sure that it goes through all the appropriate phases. So to coordinate that, the National Committee elects a steering committee of 9 people to do those kind of administrative tasks mostly. Although the steering committee also serves as spokespeople for the party. So the steering committee is made up of 7 co-chairs plus the secretary and treasurer that handle most of those administrative things. So the National Committee makes most of the decisions, but you'll see the steering committee get involved for either as spokespeople with the media or doing more administrative stuff within the party. And then finally, the National Committee can also elect delegates to go to represent the Green Party internationally. So there's a Global Greens, which is the network of Green parties throughout the world. At this point, there's over 100 Green parties, in 100 different countries across the world. And in fact, the Global Greens just met last week, the week before, really recently. And so, we had members who were representing the Green Party there, both the Global Greens as a whole, and there's also the Global Young Greens, which the Young Eco-Socialist, our youth caucus, is part of that too. So they had their global conference and met up and talked about a number of issues. Howie Hawkins, I think the podcast 2 weeks ago, he talked to the Australia Green Party and talked more about kind of things that were going on at the Global Greens. So check that out if you're interested. So, one cool thing about the Green Party in the U.S. is that we are part of this global movement. And since we have to deal with issues like climate change that need global solutions, it's really important that we think about how we can be part of a global network, a global movement. So that is the structure of the National Party. Yeah, next slide, please. Yeah.